Good afternoon. It's a hot day today. Sort of one of those clammy days where even though the sun's not really out, it's pretty humid. I want to talk to you guys today about nightmares and how I fell in love with nightmares. I grew up in industrious town, a town with many factories. Just as I was, well, a little bit before I was, just as I say, there's no sun, the sun comes out. A little before I was born, maybe a decade, the pits, the coal mine closed, and it put a lot of people out of work. So I came from a place where a lot of shops, the high street was always dying, still is dying. A lot of shops were boarded up. There was a lot of alcohol. There was the working men clubs everywhere. There were the sort of pubs what you just don't get anywhere else. It was a town where there were woods, not man-made as this. There were natural woods and trails and tracks, and what would take you to rusty bridges. And in between, you would be able to see in the distance, usually factories with sort of smoke billowing out into the skies, what sort of always made the skies grey, even though it wasn't direct pollution. I remember as a child, apart from the summer, it was kind of the climate was always grey. It was kind of being my small bubble in my village amongst the trees and the lakes and the farms. It was sort of magical, and then you would leave and there would be graffiti and people out of work in factories, and it was and buses what had the windows smashed in. It was a interesting place, an interesting way to grow up. And I used to always, you had to get into my local city. It was a town when I was a kid, but it's just got city status now, which narrows down where I'm from. And to get into the city, to go to college, to meet friends, to have a social life, to enjoy a nightlife, I would have to get 3 buses. One bus from my village into a smaller town, and then another bus, or 2 buses, sorry, and another bus into the city. And I often would come back from the city late, and there were no buses running into my small, if you like, haunting village on the outskirts of a small town. Or yeah, I mean, it's a medium-sized town to me, but to the world, a small town. And so on those nights where I couldn't get a bus back, I'd always walk back, and it was roughly 2.5 miles to 3 miles, depending on where you started. And I enjoyed walking back because I saw it as freedom. I always liked darkness. I liked the quietness of it, like stillness. I liked how my eyes adjusted to the dark eventually, and you could see the stars. And it gave me closure. It gave me time to think. So I would walk in the darkness down this track, and the track was famous for many goings on. There would be prostitution, there would be intense drug taking, there would be drug deals. It was down the side of a factory, and you would sort of come around the corner, head into my village, and you could just about make the village out. When you got about a mile within range, you can maybe see a few lights. And it's where people went to do shady business and get away. And I actually spent myself. We would go down there. We would sometimes climb onto the factory wall and see if we could get in, or we would just smoke or hang out in cars down there. And I guess the American equivalent of those sort of like lanes where you where people hook up. So I'd walked down there, and this one particular night, I decided to watch Eraserhead off my phone, which is amusing because David Lynch is not a fan of people watching movies off of phones. And I didn't have the greatest relationship with the movie. It was a movie I watched when I was 17. I watched it just before I got to film school. I wanted to really try and go through all those sort of classic movies people say you should watch. I wasn't really into surreal art at the time. So I watched it, and I admitted it was an interesting first movie, and it was definitely had some lasting impression on me. But as I grew older, I was probably about 19 now. The movie sort of stuck in my mind, and I was becoming more interested in the abstract and the absurd. So I walked down this lane. I walked from the small town, and I never ever looked up off the phone. Maybe sometimes I looked up just for a second to get my bearings, but I just kept walking down this black track. And it felt like the track was never going to end. I didn't want it to end. And I felt like I was in the movie, because in the movie they have factories. I felt like the central character had gone into the screen. I was the central character, and like I used to have my hair kind of styled a bit like him, not as big, but I definitely had the quiff and the comb over. I never remember feeling so relaxed. It was one of those moments in life where you never get back. One of those magical moments, what sort of is the threshold to something new in your life. It was incredible, and you could see birds moving about. You could hear the ducks on the lake being disturbed by me. You could see distant cars coming past me. You could see the headlights, but I just wasn't scared. And that kind of broke me into this place where I'm just not really scared in environments what are haunting or abstract or creepy. Of course, I have just about as much fear as anybody else. If there was an abandoned building down there now, I'll do something calculated. If I was to go into it, I probably wouldn't go in by myself. I would probably walk around it. I've actually found a camp down there, what looks pretty lived in. I just walked around it from a distance, quietly, to see if I could see anybody, see any movement, any fire. And when I couldn't, I went up to it to investigate, but I was very cautious not to disturb anything, so I'd probably do it like that. So there's a calculation behind me, but I end up loving nightmares. I ended up loving, to the point where I would be driving, listening to creepy stories in the dark, or just going into the woods and listening to creepy stories by a fire, or something similar. And the nightmares would creep into my art, and I found this real, it sounds very emo-ish, but I found this very weird comfort amongst these maybe not hostile, but barren, creepy isolations, to the point where it's what gets me the most excited now. I'm actually making a film on isolation and islands, because I was obsessed with a couple of years ago I go to Scotland, and we go to this, we're really are in the middle of nowhere. There's no tourists, or if there are tourists, it's the complete wrong season, and we've driven 12 hours to get to this destination, and I'm tired, and I'm treading a path what very few people have trod, and I come against the lighthouse with these tremendously fierce crashing waves hitting the side of, I think I even did a video there, I'm not sure if I uploaded it. I think I tried to do a video for a trailer for the channel there, or maybe did do, and this isolation was terrifying, because I felt alone, I felt abandoned, I felt trapped, I felt the power of nature. But at the same time, it made me excited, it made me giddy, it woke me up. And I really genuinely do think the real nightmares are the living, the 9 to 5, I feel most agitated when I'm sort of chained to this idea of this organized society. And organization is good. I'm not saying that organization society is bad. and there is kind of a comfort with the mundaneness, because you need this sort of, speaking of Dave Lynch, he likes having the same sort of thing to eat every single day. There is something interesting about that. Like you do that, and then you're able to then live in the dreams. So yeah, that's what I want to talk to you guys about, really. That's what I have spoken to you guys about. My love for nightmares, and my love for, not necessarily, I'm not talking about, when I say horror, I don't mean the classic jump scare horror. I don't even mean the psychological horror, what people seem to, they always say, oh, I don't like jump scares, but I like psychological horror. I don't really understand what that sentence means, but fair enough. I'm more talking about, I just love atmospheric pieces. I love like the back rooms, and that's what they're the sort of ideas and concepts I cherish the most. Okay, it's been fun talking to you. See you next week. Have a good week. Ciao.